Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. Habits, Part 3, from Sri Aurobindo. There is nothing to be discouraged about. The fact is that after having been so long in the mental and vital plane, you have become aware of the physical consciousness. And the physical consciousness in everybody is like that. It is inert, conservative, does not want to move, to change. It clings to its habits, what people call their character, or its habits, habitual movements, cling to it and repeat themselves like a clock, working in a persistent, mechanical way. When you have cleared your vitals somewhat, things go down and stick there. You see, if you have become self-conscious, you put pressure, perhaps, but the physical responds very slowly, hardly at first it seems to move at all. The remedy is aspiration, steady and unchanging, patient work, the psychic in the physical, calling down the light and force into these obscure parts. The light brings the consciousness of what is there. The force has to follow and work on them till they change or disappear. What you describe is the material consciousness. It is mostly subconscious, but the part of it that is conscious is mechanical, inertly moved by habits or by the forces of the lower nature. Always repeating the same unintelligent and unenlightened movements, it is attached to the routine and established rule of what already exists, unwilling to change, unwilling to receive the light or obey the higher force. Or, if it is willing, then it is unable. Or, if it is able, then it turns the action given to it by the light or the force into a new mechanical routine, and so takes out of it all soul and life. It is obscure, stupid, indolent, full of ignorance and inertia, darkness, and slowness of tamas. Defects of the physical consciousness. There are many, but mainly obscurity, inertia, tamas, a passive acceptance of the play of wrong forces, inability to change, attachment to habits, lack of plasticity, forgetfulness, loss of experiences or realizations gained, unwillingness to accept the light or to follow it, incapacity, through tamas or through attachment or through passive reaction to accustomed forces, to do what it admits to be the right and the best. The condition is that you must bring the sadhana into your physical consciousness and live for the sadhana and the divine only. You must give up positively the bad habits that still persist, and never resume those that have ceased or been interrupted. Inner experiences are helpful to the mind and higher vital for change, but for the lower vital and the outer being, a sadhana of self-discipline is indispensable. The external actions and the spirit in them must change. Your external thoughts and actions must be for the divine only. There must be self-restraint, entire truthfulness, a constant thought of the divine in all you do. This is the way for the change of the lower vital. By your constant self-dedication and self-discipline, the force will be brought down into the external, and the change made. The obstacle or wall of bondage which you feel is simply that of the habits of the ordinary physical consciousness. It is so with all. The ordinary vital nature, with its ego, desire, passions, disturbances, and the ordinary physical nature, with its strong habits and outwardness, are the chief obstacles that have to be overcome in the nature. When they fall quiet, then it is easier to enter into the true consciousness and unite with the Mother. But they are not accustomed to quietness, and as soon as it is felt, they want to come out of it and resume their ordinary movements. But this will go when the inner has sufficiently gained on the outer to dominate it. The inner things will grow and come out more and more as you feel the inner path growing until they are strong enough to rule the outer conduct. The obstacles you feel, the surging up of old things, and repetition of restlessness, etc., are due to this strength of habit of the physical nature. It lives by repeating always the same things and the same movements to which it has been accustomed in the past. The inner influence, as it comes out, will more and more create for it new habits of thought and feeling and action. And it will then dwell firmly in these, and not in the things of the old nature. Mind wants the supramental state to be a confirmation of its own cherished ideas and preconceptions. The vital wants it to be a glorification of its own desires. The physical wants it to be a rich prolongation of its own comforts and pleasures and habits. If it were to be that, it would be only an exaggerated and highly magnified consummation of the animal and the human nature, not a transition from the human into the divine. The idea about impotence is rather irrational. Impotence comes from overindulgence or wrong indulgence, certain perverse habits. It does not come from self-control. Self-control means only a diversion to other powers, because the controlled sex power becomes a force for the life energies, the powers of the mind, and the more and more potent workings of the spiritual consciousness. There is no reason for you to be depressed or discouraged. The defects of the nature of which you speak are habits of the lower vital and the external being. If you recognize them fully and frankly, and detect them and reject whenever they act or try to act upon you, they will in time disappear. The sexual desires show that the subconscious still retains the old impressions, movements, and impulses. Make the conscious parts of the being entirely free, and aspire and will for the higher consciousness to come fully into the subconscient, so that even in sleep and dream, something in you may be aware and on guard, and reject these things when they try to take form at that time. The difficulty you experience exists because speech is a formation which in the past has worked much more as an expression of the vital in man than of the mental will. Speech breaks out as the expression of the vital and its habits, without caring to wait for the control of the mind. The tongue has been spoken of as the unruly member. In your case, the difficulty has been increased by the habit of talk about others, gossip, to which your vital was very partial, so much that it cannot even yet give up the pleasure in it. It is, therefore, this tendency that must cease in the vital itself, not to be under the control of the impulse to speech, to be able to do without it as a necessity, and to speak only when one sees that it is right to do so, and only what one sees to be right to say, is a very necessary part of yogic self-control. The habits of the physical or the vital physical nature are always the most difficult to change, because their action is automatic and not governed by the mental will, and it is therefore difficult for the mental will to control or transform them. You have to persevere and form the habit of control. If you can succeed in controlling the speech often, it needs a constant vigilance. You will finally find that the control stamps itself and can, in the long run, always intervene. This must be done so long as that movement is not fully opened to the mother's light and force. For if that happens, the thing can be done more quickly, and sometimes with a great rapidity. There is also the intervention of the psychic. If the psychic being is sufficiently awake and active to intervene each time you are going to speak at random and say no, then the change becomes more easy. That part of the being, the physical mind, has no reason except its whims, its habits, or an inclination to be tamasic. What is needed is a general plasticity of the mind, the vital, the physical consciousness, a readiness to give up all attachment to these things, to accept whatever the higher consciousness brings down with it, however contrary to one's own received ideas, feelings, habits of nature. The greater the plasticity in any part of the nature, the less the resistance there. The habit of strong recurrence of the same things in our physical consciousness, so that it is difficult to get rid of its habits, is largely due to a subconscious support. The subconscious is full of irrational habits. The subconscious is the evolutionary basis in us. It is not the whole of our hidden nature, nor is it the whole origin of what we are. But things can rise from the subconscious and take shape in the conscious parts, and much of our smaller vital and physical instincts, movements, habits, character forms has this source.